April. Come high water. The same logic that causes big rivers always to flow past big cities causes cheap farms sometimes to be marooned by spring floods. Ours is a cheap farm, and sometimes when we visit it in April, we get marooned. Not intentionally, of course, but one can, to a degree, guess from weather reports when the snows up north will melt, and one can estimate how many days it takes for the flood to run the gauntlet of upriver cities. Thus, some Sunday evening, one must go back to town and work, but one can't. How sweetly the spreading waters murmur condolence for the wreckage they have inflicted on Monday morning dates. How deep and chesty the honkings of the geese as they cruise over cornfield after cornfield, each in process of becoming a lake. Every 100 yards, some new goose flails the air as he struggles to lead the echelon in its morning survey of this new and watery world. The enthusiasm of geese for high water is a subtle thing and might be overlooked by those unfamiliar with goose gossip. But the enthusiasm of carp is obvious and unmistakable. No sooner has the rising flood wetted the grassroots than here they come, rooting and wallowing with the prodigious zest of pigs turned out to pasture. Flashing red tails and yellow bellies, cruising the wagon tracks and cow paths, and shaking the reeds and bushes in their haste to explore what to them is an expanding universe. Unlike the geese and the carp, the terrestrial birds and mammals accept high water with philosophical detachment. A cardinal atop a river birch whistles loudly his claim to a territory that, but for the trees, cannot be seen to exist. A ruffed grouse drums from the flooded woods. He must be perched on the high end of his highest drumming log. Meadow mice paddle ridgeward with the calm assurance of miniature muskrats. From the orchard bounds a deer, evicted from his usual daytime bed in the willow thickets. Everywhere are rabbits, calmly accepting quarters on our hill, which serves, in Noah's absence, for an ark. The spring flood brings us more than high adventure. It brings likewise an unpredictable miscellany of floatable objects pilfered from upriver farms. An old board stranded on our meadow has, to us, the value of the same piece new from the lumberyard. Each old board has its own individual history, always unknown, but always to some degree guessable from the kind of wood, its dimensions, its nails, screws, or paint, its finish or its lack of it, its wear or decay. One can even guess from the abrasion of its edges and ends on sandbars how many floods have carried it in years past. Our lumber pile, recruited entirely from the river, is thus not only a collection of personalities, but an anthology of human strivings in upriver farms and forests. The autobiography of an old board is a kind of literature not yet taught on campuses, but any riverbank farm is a library where he who hammers or saws may read at will. Come high water, there is always an ascension of new books. There are degrees and kinds of solitude. An island in a lake has one kind, but lakes have boats, and there is always the chance that one might land to pay you a visit. A peak in the clouds has another kind, but most peaks have trails, and trails have tourists. I know of no solitude so secure as one guided by a spring flood, nor do the geese, who have seen more kinds and degrees of aloneness than I have. So we sit on our hill beside a new-blown pask and watch the geese go by. I see our road dipping gently into the waters, and I conclude with inner glee but exterior detachment, that the question of traffic, in or out, is, for this day at least, debatable only among carp. Draba. Within a few weeks now, draba, the smallest flower that blows, will sprinkle every sandy place with small blooms. He who hopes for spring with upturned eye never sees so small a thing as draba. He who despairs of spring with downcast eyes steps on it. Unknowing. He who searches for spring with his knees in the mud finds it in abundance. Draba asks and gets but scant allowance of warmth and comfort. It subsists on the leavings of unwanted time and space. Botany books give it 2 or 3 lines, but never a plate or portrait. Sand too poor and sun too weak for bigger, better blooms are good enough for draba. After all, it is no spring flower, but only a postscript to a hope. Draba plucks no heartstrings. Its perfume, if there is any, is lost in the gusty winds. Its color is plain white. Its leaves wear a sensible woolly coat. Nothing eats it. It is too small. No poet sings of it. Some botanist once gave it a Latin name and then forgot it. Altogether, it is of no importance, just a small creature that does a small job quickly and well. Bur oak. When school children vote on a state bird, flower, or tree, they are not making a decision. They are merely ratifying history. Thus, history made bur oak the characteristic tree of southern Wisconsin when the prairie grasses first gained possession of the region. But oak is the only tree that can stand up to a prairie fire and live. Have you ever wondered why a thick crust of corky bark covers the whole tree, even to the smallest twigs? This cork is armor. But oaks were the shock troops sent by the invading forest to storm the prairie. Fire is what they had to fight. Each April, before the new grasses had covered the prairie with unburnable greenery, fires ran at will over the land, sparing only such old oaks as had grown bark too thick to scorch. Most of these groves of scattered veterans, known to the pioneers as oak openings, consist of bur oaks. Engineers did not discover insulation. They copied it from these old soldiers of the Prairie War. Botanists can read the story of that war for 20,000 years. The record consists partly of pollen grains embedded in peats, partly of relic plants interned in the rear of the battle and there forgotten. The record shows that the forest front at times retreated almost to Lake Superior. At times it advanced far to the south. At one period it advanced so far southward that spruce and other rear guard species grew to and beyond the southern border of Wisconsin. Spruce pollen appears at a certain level in all peat bogs of the region, but average battle lines between prairie and forest was about where it is now, and the net outcome of the battle was a draw. One reason for this was that there were allies that threw their support first to one side, then to the other. Thus, rabbits and mice moved down the prairie, herbs in the summer, and in winter, girdled any oak seedlings that survived the fires. Squirrels planted acorns in fall and ate them all the rest of the year. June beetles undermined the prairie sod in their grub stage, but defoliated the oaks in their adult stage. But for the geeing and hawing of allies, and hence of the victory, we should not have today that rich mosaic of prairie and forest soils which looks so decorative on a map. Jonathan Carver has left us a vivid word picture of the prairie border in pre-settlement days. On 10th of October, 1763, he visited Blue Mounds, a group of high hills, now wooded, near the southwestern corner of Dane County. He says, "I ascended one of the highest of these and had an extensive view of the country. For many miles nothing was to be seen but lesser mountains, which appeared at a distance like haycocks, they being free from trees. Only a few groves of hickory and stunted oaks covered some of the valleys." In the 1840s, a new animal, the settler, intervened in the prairie battle. He didn't mean to. He just plowed enough fields to deprive the prairie of its immemorial ally, fire. Seedling oaks forthwith romped over the grasslands in legions, and what had been the prairie region became a region of woodlot farms. If you doubt the story, go count the rings on any set of stumps on any ridge woodlot in southwest Wisconsin. All trees except the oldest veterans date back to the 1850s and the 1860s, and this was when fires ceased on the prairie. John Muir grew up in Marquette County during this period when new woods overrode the old prairies and engulfed the oak openings in the thickets of saplings. In his boyhood and youth, he recalls that the uniformly rich soil of the Illinois and Wisconsin prairies produced so close and tall a growth of grasses for fires that no tree could live on it. Had there been no fires, these fine prairies, so marked a feature of the country, would have been covered by the heaviest forest. As soon as the oak openings were settled, and the farmers had prevented running grass fires, the grubs, roots, grew up into trees and formed tall thickets so dense that it was difficult to walk through them, and every trace of the sunny oak openings vanished. Thus, he who owns a veteran bur oak owns more than a tree. He owns a historical library and a reserved seat in the theater of evolution. To the discerning eye, his farm is labeled with the badge and symbol of the Prairie War. Sky Dance. I owned my farm for 2 years before learning that the sky dance is to be seen over my woods every evening in April and May. Since we discovered it, my family and I have been reluctant to miss even a single performance. The show begins on the first warm evening in April at exactly 7:50 p.m. The curtain goes up 1 minute later each day until the 1st of June when the time is 7:50. This sliding scale is dictated by vanity, the dancer demanding a romantic light intensity of exactly 5-foot candles. Do not be late and sit quietly, lest he fly away in a huff. Stage props, like the opening hour, reflect the temperamental demands of the performer. The stage must be an open amphitheater in woods or brush, and in its center there must be a mossy spot, a streak of sterile sand, a bare outcrop of rock, or a bare roadway. Why the male woodcock should be such a stickler for a bare dance floor puzzled me at first, but I now think it's a matter of legs. Woodcock's legs are short, and his struttings cannot be executed to advantage in dense grass or weeds. Nor could his ladies see them there. I have more woodcocks than most farmers because I have more mossy sand, too poor to support grass. Knowing the place and the hour, you seat yourself under a bush to the east of the dance floor and wait, watching against the sunset for the woodcock's arrival. He flies in low from some neighboring thicket, alights on the bare moss, and at once begins the overture, a series of queer, throaty peents, spaced about 2 seconds apart, and sounding much like the summer call of the nighthawk. Suddenly the peenting ceases, and the bird flutters skyward in a series of wild spirals, emitting a musical twitter. Up and up he goes, the spirals steeper and smaller, the twittering louder and louder until the performer is only a speck in the sky. Then, without warning, he tumbles like a crippled plane, giving voice in a soft, liquid warble that a March bluebird might envy. At a few feet from the ground, he levels off and returns to his painting ground, usually to the exact spot where the performance began, and there resumes his painting. It is soon too dark to see the bird on the ground, but you can see his flights against the sky for an hour, which is the usual duration of the show. On moonlight nights, however, there may continue at intervals as long as the moon continues to shine. At daybreak, the whole show is repeated. In early April, the final curtain falls at 5:15 a.m. The time advances 2 minutes a day until June, when the performance closes for the year at 3:15. Why the disparity in sliding scale? Alas, I fear that even romance tires, for it takes only a fifth as much light to stop the sky dance at dawn as suffices to start it at sunset. It is fortunate, perhaps, that no matter how intently one studies the 100 little dramas of the woods and meadows, no one can ever learn all of the salient facts about any one of them. What I do not yet know about the sky dance is, where is the lady, and just what part, if any, does she play? I often see 2 woodcocks on a painting ground, and the 2 sometimes fly together, but they never paint together. Is it the second bird, the hen, or a rival male? Another unknown. Is the twitter vocal, or is it mechanical? My friend Bill Feeney once clapped a net over a painting bird and removed his outer primary wing feathers. Thereafter the bird painted and warbled, but twittered no more. But one such experiment is hardly conclusive. Another unknown. Up to what stage of nesting does the male continue the sky dance? My daughter once saw a bird painting within 20 yards of a nest containing hatched eggshells. But was this his lady's nest? Or is it his secretive fellow, possibly bigamous, without our ever having found it out? These and many other questions remain mysteries of the deepening dusk. The drama of the sky dance is enacted nightly on hundreds of farms, the owners of which sigh for entertainment, but harbor the illusion that it is to be sought in theaters. They live on in the land, but not by the land. The woodcock is a living refutation of the theory that the utility of a game bird is to serve as a target, or to pose gracefully on a slice of toast. No one would rather hunt woodcock in October than I, but since learning of the sky dance, I find myself calling 1 or 2 birds enough. I must be sure that come April, there be no dearth of dancers in the sunset sky.